Hi guys. So I have Dr. Angela and Dr. Sarah here with me for an interview today that we're going to be talking about lactation and breastfeeding, which is a real hot topic for a lot of new mums and even mums that need advice for their second kid. And Dr. Angela and Dr. Sarah are from Sydney Perinatal Doctors, and we're going to just dive in. Girls, if you can introduce a little spill about yourself first, and then we'll go into the questions, I guess.
Cool. So I'm Dr. Sarah. This is Dr. Angela. We run Sydney Perinatal Doctors. We are general practitioners in the inner west of Sydney. We are also both mothers, and we've got a particular interest in all things related to babies. So we help people, we visit you at home or do telehealth, and we help you whether you're wanting to become pregnant, whether you've just found out you are pregnant, or you've just had a baby and maybe you need help with your breastfeeding or with sleep or settling or stuff like that.
Beautiful. Offering so much service, girls. So let's just dive straight in because we've got a few questions. So what is the importance of the magical word of colostrum that everyone hears about and Googles? Why is it so important?
So colostrum is the gold liquid that's expressed from the breasts before the regular breast milk comes in. So it's quite, a thick sort of goldy colour because it's so concentrated. So there's lots of nutrients in those few little drops that you do get. So lots of antibodies to help fight infection and lots of calories and nutrition in that, just to help baby in those really early days before the milk comes in. And you can actually express it from your breast before you give birth.
I have heard about that. So when any certain time that you can do that, or?
So it depends is the answer, but for some women from about 36 weeks onwards, it is actually safe to start trying to express some colostrum from your breast, and you can save it. So you can get little syringes to store the colostrum, freeze it, and then you can actually give it to your baby when the baby's born.
They've thought of everything, right?
So you've thought of everything.
And then at least that way they don't miss out if, breastfeeding doesn't come easy, or if anything,
Yeah, so you've always got that little backup there in the really early days. If the baby needs an extra mil or so of colostrum, you've got it there for the baby.
Liquid gold.
Liquid gold.
So speaking of that, obviously around that time frame of when you can express it out, so when does the milk come in general?
So usually the milk comes in about 72 hours. It's usually sort of that third night that you switch over from the colostrum to the regular milk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a process that involves obviously the hormonal changes of having gone from your body's realised that you're no longer actually pregnant.
Yes.
Plus the hormonal changes that occur with you having that wonderful skin to skin time with your baby and your baby actually stimulating the breast. That third night can often be the first sort of tricky moment in the newborn period, because the baby tends to start doing what we call cluster feeding.
Yes.
And that is, they often spend a significant amount of time at the breast, and they just seem to want more and more and more and more. And that's because the biggest thing that drives your milk supply basically is the concept of supply and demand. So the more the baby empties the breast, the more you're going to make. And so they really just get on there, they do their cluster feed, they get it going, and the milk should start coming through more as the less concentrated, just normal breast milk rather than that colostrum.
So obviously normal to expect that come the third night, you're going to be up and going to be a bit full on for everybody.
Mum's job is just to sit there and feed.
Yeah.
Partner's job is to supply the water and the snacks and make sure the phone and the remote control are within reach.
Yes.
Yeah. I love it. So what are your top feeding techniques and tips? Because it's,
I think the biggest one that I see is that I would recommend doing a baby-led attachment rather than a mother-led attachment. So there's a lot of focus on mums bringing the breast to baby, shaping the breast, putting the breast in baby's mouth. Whereas what we know is that babies are actually born with an innate ability to actually find the nipple and latch on themselves. And what we find when we allow the baby to do that is a much more relaxed baby, and often a better latch as well. So allowing that baby to latch on themselves, and the way that you do that is for mum to be nice and relaxed laying back, and then just putting the baby in the, like holding the baby in the right position, and then allowing them to actually take the breast in the mouth rather than us forcing mum's breast into baby's mouth.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Like I breastfed my kids too, and when I've done the skin to skin, and it's amazing how they just know where to go. But it's a good point to actually every feed probably let them lead the way, because even though I knew that they could do it, I didn't follow that technique all the time. So very good point.
Sometimes mum's thinking about expediency and she's thinking, I just need to feed you, I just want you to
you're hungry,
get it done. But even if you just think about that, when you sit down for your dinner, you don't sit at the table and someone starts shoveling stuff in your mouth. Okay? You sit at the table and you do what you're ready. You might look at your food first. You might actually smell it. You decide, am I going to start with this part or that part? You cut some food up. No one shoves it in your mouth.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So we've got to trust that the baby also knows what they're doing too, and not try and over control the situation.
Breastfeeding is very much a trust exercise. It's trusting yourself and trusting the baby as well. So trusting that they're going to be able to feed the appropriate amount to fill up their tummy, and trusting that your breast will be able to deliver that breast milk to them. Yeah, very much a trust-based exercise.
Yeah, because we really don't know what's going to happen until it's that moment, really. So expectation and reality. So it's good. Okay, so how do we increase milk supply? Is it more so based on just cluster feeding? Is that going to increase the milk supply, or is there anything else that we can do to increase milk supply?
I think the first thing to just bring up here is that concept of whether or not you need to worry about increasing your milk supply.
Good point.
So obviously, in an ideal situation, you will be able to make milk. Your baby will be able to take that milk, and it will be related to supply and demand, like I said. So as long as, look, some people like to stick to schedules, but we really do believe in what we call on-demand breastfeeding. We breastfeed to cue. If the baby's hungry, you feed them. You would know yourself that some days you're more hungry, some times of day you're more hungry. Most of the time, unless there are actually problems, we can trust the baby to take what they need when they need it. And we can trust your body most of the time to make what that baby needs according to what the baby is telling the body. So if you are exclusively breastfeeding, then the best thing you can do is just breastfeed. When the baby seems to want the breast, give the baby the breast. But yes, there are unfortunately times when there might seem to be supply issues. First thing is get us involved early if you think there are any issues, because we need to work out, is the issue actually with you and your supply, or something else related to your breast and your nipple, or is the issue baby's latch and baby's ability to take the milk out of the breast? Because as we say, if it's a supply demand thing, then if baby can't empty the breast, it doesn't matter if you can make amazing amounts of milk. If it's not getting emptied, it's not going to happen. So part of it is getting that lactation help early on if you think you have any issues, just so that we can actually work out what's happening and try and troubleshoot that for you. If we decide, all of us together, that the issue is that, yes, you do need help boosting your supply. And obviously there's a few things that we talk about. The biggest stuff is the simple stuff to start with. Just, are you hydrated and are you eating enough? Mums forget to drink, they forget to snack. You do need the calories, and you do need the water in order to make that milk for someone else. As Ange keeps going back to, a large part's about relaxing. Giving the breast the time just to do what it needs to do. We can look at things like heat packs. There are some dietary supplements that sometimes help, and occasionally we need to talk about medication. But the biggest thing is drain the breast. So offer it frequently, and occasionally we might also have to ask you to pump. to help with some extra drainage, but you know, that's from that perspective of just supply and demand. Get milk out, you should make more.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So speaking of pumps, what's your thoughts? Like, I used to do it with my hand and just know how to do it that way manually. I've tried the manual pump where you attach it, and then I've had friends that have loved doing the digital pumps. I wasn't a massive fan of the digital pump. What are your thoughts? Difference? Is there a difference? Is there a preference?
There's definitely a difference. In terms of hand expression, which sounds like, Tash, what you might have.
Yes, that's what it was. Yep.
Not everyone is particularly skilled at that, I will say.
I've freaked out a few
Skill and
friends
an
doing
art,
it
so well done
doing that
for
way, and they
getting
were
that
like, "Holy shit!"
yes, you can do
And I was
that.
like, "Yep." I can't do it anymore.
Hand expression can be really helpful if you're wanting to drain a small amount from the breast. So for example, if your breasts are quite engorged, you can actually hand express, say, 10 or 20 mils off, just to allow the baby to attach better, for example. I probably wouldn't advocate, I don't know if you disagree, but I probably wouldn't advocate for doing like full breast emptying hand expression, just because that seems,
my hand would get tired.
I know, I'm like tired thinking about it. So, and then
although theoretically you could.
Theoretically you could.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think there are easier ways.
Yeah.
The manual pumps versus the electric pumps. So we know that a double electric pump, ideally that's hospital grade, is what is recommended for best breast drainage. But I will say women respond differently to different pumps. So I know Sarah and I both have a different preference, or at least had a different preference for our pumps when we were pumping ourselves, just because of the way that our breasts responded to the different pumps. But as a blanket rule, I would say ideally a double electric hospital grade pump is going to be best.
First preference.
It depends on why you're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, if you just need to get a little bit off to soften it, the hand expression or whatever pump is probably going to work. If you need to pump to increase your supply, or if you're doing something like exclusively pumping, so you really need to make sure that the supply is working, then you really do need really good drainage. And you also want it to be time efficient, which again, that hospital grade double pumping
is the best result.
Efficient.
No, that's a good point. So that's probably the best place to go. And then what about is it something that should we have that? Like, is that something you put on your baby shower list and be like, get it for me? Or is it just wait and see and then run out and get it?
That's a bit controversial. You know, I mean, look, traditionally speaking, obviously you don't want to spend money on things that you don't need.
They're not cheap, right?
These hospital grade double pumps that we're talking about are often a good 300.
Yeah.
You know, you can sometimes get them cheaper on sale or cheaper secondhand, etc. But you know, they tend to be quite exy.
Yeah.
It might depend on also your other experiences. I mean, I know personally I did purchase my pump before I gave birth, because I knew about my return to work plans, and I knew that when I went back to work, I was actually going to want to pump at work. So I knew that at some point I would want to pump, and then I bought it in sales so that it would be cheaper. So I did buy mine beforehand, and I do know women who've put it on like the baby list. But equally, depending on your return to work plans, if your breastfeeding journey goes well, it's entirely possible that you might not need to pump. I mean, you know, me needing to pump personally was entirely for social reasons. I had no supply issues, so I did not need to pump. It was only because I returned to work. So, you know, if you do get it too early, you might end up with something you don't need.
Yes.
That's it. There's a pretty good market for the secondhand ones.
There is indeed. And you can hire them as well. So we do breast pump as well through Sydney Perinatal Doctors. So if you're not
that's
sure,
good to know.
You
just try it.
Want to try it out, we can help you with that.
We can help you with that.
You guys do it all. I love it.
We try.
It's like right from the beginning.
If you do need to buy one for medical reasons, so you know, if you are having supply issues, for example, or if your baby has a suck issue that means that you have to offer the bottle and you want to do the expressed.
Yes.
Your GP, if you've got any private health insurance, it can often be covered as part of your extras.
Oh,
and so
okay.
your GP can write you a letter that says that you actually medically need the breast pump.
Yeah.
Obviously, again, doesn't work for someone like myself who just wants it to go to work. But you know, if you have a reason that you actually need it, you can often get a letter that helps you get some of that money back on your.
Okay, that's good to know. So obviously you're not just like, I've got to fork out the money, and you don't want to have to just be like, oh, I'm having this issue, but like I'd rather just switch and give formula. Like you can still have that choice where you can express instead.
Yeah. The other thing while we're on the topic of pumps is just the importance of what we call the flange size. So the flange is that bit with the hole and the sort of cone that actually goes over the nipple. Obviously, most pumps just come with one size, which is the size that they is the most common size. But people have some very different shaped and sized nipples.
Yes.
And your nipples even change size and shape sometimes across the course of a feed. So when you put the flange over your nipple, the nipple should move freely with the vacuum in and out of that pump, and it should not be rubbing on the side of the tube. But then equally, the areola, which is that darker patch that you've got around the nipple, should not be being sucked into the tube. So it's very important that that fit is correct. There are online measuring things that you can do to sort of work out. I mean, now I wouldn't, unless you really think that you are, you know, an outlier on either end of the size spectrum, I wouldn't usually say you need to measure before you buy it, because everything will come with a set of flanges. But if you put them on and it's really uncomfortable, or you really think, gosh, my, you know, half my breast is being pulled into this, or wow, my nipple doesn't fit, then you really do need to look at measuring your nipple and considering buying a different flange set.
You can cause quite significant trauma if you're using the wrong flange.
And it can also increase getting blocked ducts. And the milk transfer won't occur as well, which means that when you actually are trying to support your supply, you're not getting what you need in terms of getting it.
Well, that's a really good point, because then you think, oh, I'm doing it wrong, and you just think that the product itself is right and what I'm doing wrong, but really it could be the product. Like it could just be that simple thing and the size is wrong. Like when you're bottle feeding and then you haven't upgraded the teat. I didn't know that was a thing until it was a thing, and then I was like, oh, the teats change depending on the milk flow. So little things like that, if you don't know, could just be a slight modification. And you don't want to be dealing with pain thinking that, oh, it's normal to feel pain.
Not
normal to feel pain. It shouldn't hurt.
You need some help.
So good. So this is probably a question for people that either haven't breastfed or people, I find that this is an outside question that they tend to ask people, and you think, and you doubt yourself. How much milk does a newborn need? And they was like, is it getting enough? Are they getting enough? And what are your thoughts?
I look at a couple of things. So firstly, I don't want to put a number on it. We're not going to put a number on it. There isn't a magic number. 3 things about the baby. Does the baby actually eat to the point of being happy? Like, can you see that they are sated? You know, they actually eat and they're full and they're good for now. Like, I've had enough for now. Is the baby putting on weight appropriately? Are they making regular wet nappies? Then they're getting enough milk.
Beautiful. It's not about the quantity. We shouldn't be having
not about the actual numbers.
No. And obviously when you're direct feeding a baby, so the baby's not going to know how much they're actually taking in. So putting numbers on it, you know, I think some women like to pump and see how much they're giving the baby so that they can know for sure. It's not about that. It's about making sure that the baby is happy, gaining weight appropriately, and making lots of wet and dirty nappies.
It's good. I love it. So there's obviously, breastfeeding is really hard. There's a lot of mums that want to breastfeed and then struggle to. And, you know, obviously everyone's just got a different story on that case. And so because a lot of mums struggle with breastfeeding, how long should a mum persist at it? And what are the signs that maybe it's just too hard and it's okay to introduce formula or do something different?
So I think in terms of how long should you persist at it, what I would say as part of that is get help really early on. If you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure if things are going well or something's not going right, can call us, so that we can help you. If you have a goal in mind of, oh, I want to breastfeed my baby, or I want to breastfeed my baby for 12 months or whatever that might be, we can actually help you achieve that. And I would say most of the time we're able to get our patients to their breastfeeding goals or beyond. So if you come to us early on with the problem, then we're able to help you. But once we get to the point of, significant trauma to the breast, lots of mental health concerns around breastfeeding, and a really, I guess, just a bad cycle around breastfeeding, it does become a lot harder to fix things and iron things out. How long is a piece of string in terms of how long to persevere for? But what I would say is the earlier that you can get help, the better. When to introduce formula. So you had a really good point about this, Sarah, when we were chatting about this earlier. But you said basically the goal is a happy and fed baby and a sane mother. Same mother.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more important than those two things. So if breastfeeding is interfering with either one of those things, then
maybe it's time to look at other options.
That's right.
Yeah. We are obviously incredibly pro breastfeeding. It is wonderful. It is natural. It's got so many pros. I suppose. So many pros, so many benefits for baby, so many benefits for mother in terms of things like decreasing your breast cancer risk and that sort of thing. The bonding. So we are so pro breastfeeding, and we will do everything we can to help a woman keep going if that's what she wants to do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think sometimes the breast is best message does alienate a few women. There is so much stuff already that allows us the opportunity for mum guilt. Even just that and thing
judgment.
Like I go to see women sometimes and they're just like, oh, I gave him one bottle. And you can see that they think that I am going to be absolutely horrified. And I'm like, you needed to feed your baby. You fed your baby. Let's just focus on that. You fed your baby. And that's the most important thing at the end of the day. We do want to encourage and support breastfeeding, and we really do want to help women reach their goals.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a very personal decision for everyone.
Yeah.
And I never want to let anyone feel guilty for deciding that they need some or all formula.
Yeah.
And actually on that concept of some versus all, that's something else I often have to say to mums is that breastfeeding is not all versus nothing.
Yeah.
So there are women who obviously, again, exclusive breastfeeding is a thing that a lot of us aim for. And if we can have that, that's wonderful. And again, we will do what we can to support you to get that if that's your goal. But, you're not suddenly a bad mum if your baby needs some bottles and gets some breastfeeding, and you can still get so many benefits from breastfeeding occasionally or a certain amount and still need a top up.
Yeah.
So it really is just so personal.
So working out if you can do that juggle, because I think it's sometimes hard to do the top up and you're breastfeeding and then you're doing the bottles and then you're dealing with it. Yeah, it's a lot of tasks to do, but obviously it's sort of up to the personal preference, and all judgment should be pushed to the side. And as long as mum and baby are happy and healthy and mentally okay, then
that's right.
Yeah. Right. One thing that I don't think you've asked us that just goes with that concept of mixed feeds and stuff is it's worth pointing out that if your aim is breastfeeding, whether it's exclusive breastfeeding or predominant breastfeeding, and you do need to introduce a bottle for whatever reason, technique matters.
Yes.
So people talk about nipple confusion or babies ending up with bottle preference, and the thing is that a bottle doesn't naturally mimic the way the breast milk flows. So breast milk does not just flow straight out of the breast. The baby has to stimulate the breast enough to cause what we call the letdown, which is that first bit starts spurting out, and then the baby has to actually work to extract the milk. And then that letdown actually stops and the baby has to work again to cause a letdown and get that milk to happen again. And so if you are bottle feeding a baby, obviously you can just tip a bottle upside down and the milk will just pour out. So what we want, and look, there are videos on YouTube, we can give you advice if you need it, but you want your baby in a sort of semi-upright position. You only want to tip that bottle horizontally so that there's just a little bit of milk in the teat. You don't want to be actually just pouring it down. You don't shove it in their mouth. The same as we said, you don't shove a breast in their mouth. You pop it on their lips and like give them that opportunity to take it themselves. You want to let them suck for a bit and then you want to pop it back out again and make it work for it. This is gonna, even if you're not actually breastfeeding or aiming for breastfeeding, it's a great way to feed them. You don't want to overfeed the baby. The baby does have natural inbuilt intuition into how much it wants to eat. But if you sit there pouring it down the throat, they will eat more than they need. And that will make them uncomfortable and it will increase their sort of tummy upset. They're more likely to spew it back up on you,
problems.
And then, as I say, if you are also trying to breastfeed, they're more likely, they can get lazy. Why would I work at the breast when if I fuss about for a bit and don't bother, someone will pour it down my throat for me and I don't need to work? So just any time that you are going to introduce a bottle, worth looking into paced bottle feeding and making sure that your technique's up to scratch. And that goes for other caregivers too. So
make sure they're feeding the same way.
When I did leave, I was going to leave the kids with the grandparents, or if you need to leave your kids at daycare early on and they're still on bottle phase, actually, print them out. The Australian Breastfeeding Association makes a little handout that you can give to other caregivers to say, this is how we're feeding my baby. Actually want you to do what we're doing at home.
Yeah, because I think the idea is like, I've bottle fed my kids before and I'm just going to do the same way. But I didn't actually realize, because I did have that problem where I was breastfeeding and then I introduced the bottle and then my son ended up preferring the bottle and was very fussy on the boob. And it was like, I probably wasn't ready to let go yet. But then I was like, what am I going to do? The damage was not the damage, but the issue had already happened. It was
just make it harder. It's one more thing you have to deal with.
And if someone's like, it makes you flustered if they're fussing, and you know what I mean? So you just want to feed them and be like, okay, well, maybe this is just the end for that part of the process. But good point. I did not know that there was didn't think. And is there a bottle preference? Like, does it matter on the brand or the type of tea?
That's another one that everyone's going to have their own opinion on.
Yes.
Look, the one thing I would say is that you do want a slow flow teat. So start with the slowest flow you can get. Obviously, as they get bigger and older, sometimes you'll upgrade your teats to a faster flow. But in those early days, start with slow flow. That's really hard to say.
It is. It's like a tongue. You can get even super slow flow teats. That's usually my preference for newborn babies.
The slowest you can get.
Slowest you can get, and that's the super slow flow. So it's got the smallest little hole in the top, so that it's a really slow transfer across that hole.
And they're used to sort of working for it.
Just like they would at the breast, and that's normal. We want to mimic that normal feeding pattern.
Probably one thing that I did forget to ask. I've had mastitis before. What are some signs? Like, 'cause I wasn't actually sick when I had mastitis, and so some people think I'm going to have flu symptoms and need, so sort of maybe what is it? What are the signs to look out for, and then how to get rid of it?
So mastitis is a breast infection. It can actually happen to anyone at any time, but most commonly does happen in the breastfeeding period. And what people are usually noticing is that they'll start off with a lump in the breast and it'll be a bit sore, and then you get this red patch or red area over that part of the breast, and you can feel quite unwell, as you said, the flu-like symptoms, so things like fevers, sweats, vomiting, muscle aches and pains, and just within yourself feeling really awful are the main ones. Mastitis is one of these infections that can get away from us really quickly. So it's not something that you want to sit on at all, because it can very quickly progress and become a severe infection. So,
or even a breast abscess.
So
that could require surgical drainage. So you really want to fix it before it gets to that point.
So that's right. So if you even so much as think you have mastitis, contact someone that will be able to help you. So a GP that has breast knowledge to be able to help you. So it does require at the minimum oral antibiotics. Sometimes we need to send women to hospital for antibiotics through a drip as well, because it can become quite severe.
And in terms of how it affects the feeding and stuff like that, there's a few things that I introduced, but so it was like the heat pack and then cabbage leaf.
You can and should keep feeding.
Yes.
And part of the treatment of mastitis, whilst it does need antibiotics because it is a bacterial infection, a large part of the treatment is continuing to drain that breast. So feeding is really important. Yes, you can use heat packs to encourage those ducts to open up more.
Yes. So heat packs while you're feeding, like, obviously not going to burn the baby, but is it sort of before you feed?
And then sometimes people will put a cold pack on afterwards, because obviously a cold pack can actually help decrease the inflammation and decrease if you had a blocked duct that was sort of contributing to the mastitis, can sort of not encourage it to fill up too much afterwards. The cabbage leaves have been around for years, obviously. There is actually evidence that they help. I don't think it
helped me.
Know why. Some people have said it is because they're a bit cooler. Some people have obviously suggested maybe there is something in them that somehow works. They have done scientific studies, and the cabbage leaves do actually help. So if you want to go for it.
Look, I've told my friends about it before, and I'm like, it worked for me. I can't remember how I found out about it, but obviously cut a hole for your nipple, put it in like little pieces in the freezer and have them frozen, and you smell like, I'm half Greek, so you smell like dormothers for a while. But I found that it really, I was on the oral antibiotics as well for the period, but my breasts were also engorged like massive. And then the cabbage leaf sort of did make it, I felt that made a difference. So I don't know where it came from, but obviously people have been doing it for a long time.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, that sort of covers all my questions. Thanks so much, girls. Is there anything else that you sort of want to add, or you've given so many tips?
No, not really. I mean, I guess if people want to reach out to us, there are avenues to reach out. So there's a couple of different ways, really. So one is that you can follow us on Instagram, so Sydney Perinatal Doctors. You can send us an email. So our email address is on our website, but it's info@sydneyperinatalDoctors.com.au. And we have a website as well where you can book online for either a telehealth appointment or an in-person appointment. And that's sydneyperinataldoctors.com.au.
Okay, that's awesome. So for anyone watching our video, please reach out to Dr. Angela and Dr. Sarah, because I just think you guys so awesome, and you really help a mum from right at the start the whole way through, and just be their go-to shop really for the support that they need mentally, and also like all the things that needs to happen. So you really, I think, will guide a lot of new parents on their path and the journey, which can obviously be very bumpy along the way. So we need as much support as we can get. Yeah. Thanks so much, guys.
That's it, Tash. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Bye.
Bye.